Russia just exposed US's plan for Bitcoin. Now, this could all be very well connected with the news that we just saw from MicroStrategy not being included in the S&P 500. This could all be connected and all a part of the evil plan to take over Bitcoin and use Bitcoin to potentially pay off $37 trillion worth of debt. Don't listen to me, though. Let's listen in to what the Russians had to say about the United States plan for Bitcoin and crypto.
Америка прямо сейчас пытается поменять правила на рынке золота и криптовалют. Вспомните, какой у них долг. 35 триллионов долларов.
Now, the interesting thing is that he cited just a little bit late on how big this United States debt is, as we're sitting at $37.5 trillion. So he's just a couple trillion short. And it's interesting timing of what Donald Trump came out and said here oh so recently as well with the respect to Bitcoin. Now let's listen into this.
It's a big industry, by the way. In fact, when the stock market went down recently, crypto and Bitcoin and all of that went down much less than anybody else as a group. And we've created a very powerful industry, and that's much more important than anything that we invest in. We invest in it, but really that was an industry that wasn't doing particularly well. I got involved with it a couple of years ago. It's become amazing. I mean, it's
wow. Donald Trump, he's the reason for Bitcoin all of a sudden being oh so wonderful of an industry. Now, look, I mean, I think that Donald Trump has been a huge net positive for the overall industry. I mean, look at strategy. 60% of their buys have come since he's been elected. So the regulatory clarity is absolutely huge. And I think he's been a very big positive effect for the industry. But it's not to say that he isn't cashing in, so to speak, on all of this here, right? I mean, look, take it for what it is, because it is the fake news media and CNN saying Trump is primed to crash in to help the crypto gold rush he created. But it's very interesting what Russia said about potentially utilizing Bitcoin and crypto in order to pay off the $35 trillion worth of debt. Now, the United States government had a huge push for stablecoin regulation, and they were screaming stablecoin this, stablecoin that, stablecoin this. And in fact, so much so that everybody was joking about the Bitcoin conference, saying it should have been called this stablecoin conference. Now, what we also see is some public officials moving to the private sector and moving towards stablecoin companies, when we had not so long ago Bo Hines move from the United States government to Tether, the biggest stable coin of them all. Now, it's very interesting here because everybody was saying when the stablecoin bills were passed that Tether would be the biggest loser in all of this, even though Tether has now primed themselves to be fully intertwined with the United States government, not only from their hire of Bo Hines, but additionally from the amount of U.S. treasuries that Tether holds. I go over this a bunch on this channel, so if you know that, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. But either way, we are seeing the revolution of this Bitcoin industry here take over in the United States. And that's an undeniable fact here, folks, because we are seeing just how much the crypto and Bitcoin industry are getting intertwined. In fact, we have the strategic reserve allegedly get dumped in here and the U.S. digital asset stockpile, even though we haven't seen any Bitcoin buys. Everybody's saying, oh, you know what? We should look and see that this is going to be a huge, huge priority here in the near future. And nobody should worry about the potential of this not happening, right? The U.S. Patrick Witt is saying, oh, it's a top priority. But at this point, we're all saying, hey, put your money where your mouth is. Let's make some buys. Let's move this forward a little bit faster than, let's say, initially we are seeing. But on the flip side of things, Russia exposing the United States, saying, hey, they're going to use this to pay off the $35 trillion worth of debt. Well, it's very interesting because how are they going to obtain this much amount of Bitcoin when we haven't seen a buy anytime recently? I mean, look at this. The United States has 198,000 Bitcoin under management, but hasn't made a single purchase since then. Now, if you look at the top dog holders, well, okay, you could acquire some of these publicly traded companies like the smaller guys, or you could go for the top dog like strategy. Now, it is interesting because we did just see, how Intel had 10% of its entire company get bought up by the United States government, and everybody's saying, "Hey, I'm just connecting a few dots here on how this could be the potential for the United States to use this to pay off that $37.5 trillion worth of debt." But if we take a step back and we really look at just the facts that I've been presenting out here, it begs the question. Donald Trump ran on a huge campaign of, hey, we're going to get a Bitcoin strategic reserve, free Ross, all of these great things. He did a ton in his first 100 days, but yet no Bitcoin buys. Now, it's not like these Bitcoin buys take a while to figure out. I mean, look at Strategy, for example, right? I mean, literally, if you look at all of their Bitcoin buys and purchases, well, there's 78 now total, and they had 42. So 36 since Donald Trump got elected. Now, there's 52 weeks in the year. So just 16, and we could have basically a year's worth of buys since Donald Trump got elected. Now, and this is not slowing down by any means. And if you look around here, we see a very interesting connection with Michael Saylor and how he's talking about these different industries, as well as, the Bitcoin industry swallowing it up. Now, let's listen into this good keynote here from Michael Saylor himself.
Environment. There's no reason to think that will change in the next 4 years. And what's 4 years mean? Well, we've added about $2 trillion to the crypto economy in a few months.
So he's already saying, hey, we've a couple $1 trillion to the quote unquote crypto economy in just a few months since Donald Trump has been elected. And on top of that, his proposal for the Bitcoin industry and the Bitcoin strategic reserve for the United States government is literally a $200 trillion proposal. Now, that's not just me saying all these things, right? This is Michael Saylor, the billionaire, the Giga Chad himself, one of the most bullish billionaires in Bitcoin. Man, that's a mouthful. But either way, right? $200 trillion worth of Bitcoin. Now, of course, we have the $2 trillion market cap. We could see Bitcoin explode from here. And there's a lot of different nuances behind this $200 trillion number. So I'm not saying that, oh, you're going to buy $200 trillion worth of Bitcoin. At this point, the market cap is significantly lower than that. But what Michael Saylor was saying was essentially this could be worth that $200 trillion mark if they were to buy 5 million worth of Bitcoin. Now, right now, that's literally, 10 times nearly the amount that Strategy has, maybe closer to 8 times as much as Strategy has. But why is Saylor really pushing so heavy to get that 1 million mark and get up there? Well, people love their round numbers and whatnot, but it's interesting that, Saylor is being such a heavy bull to push and wanting the United States government to go in on this, because if he was really just trying to go forward with the shareholders, why would he want the government, an entity that could essentially print money to buy Bitcoin? Why would he want the United States government to start buying Bitcoin? You have to ask yourself that question with all of these little connections here that Saylor has with the US government. Is why would you even want them to keep buying? Of course, we have the pridefulness of Americans, but if Saylor really wants to buy as much Bitcoin as possible, why wouldn't he just be doing it more quiet? It's very interesting to see the relationship kind of build out and play out here, as he's discussed the U.S. Bitcoin Strategic Reserve and why security holders can keep him sleepless and his own economic mortality. Now, Strategy, envisions a $200 trillion asset by 2045, transforming it to a global settlement layer of AI, and the U.S. adoption will cement its dominance, forcing worldwide adoption. Now, at this time, Strategy had like 140,000 Bitcoin less, but they've been keeping to move that distance higher and higher. And he suggests burning his Bitcoin holdings will bestow economic immortality. But either way, he says by 2024 or 2045, it'll be a $200 trillion asset class. And that's because it'll start to take over, some of these other asset classes that we see. And, if you ask the likes of Larry Fink, who also is very intertwined with the United States government and potentially one of the more powerful guys in the world, him saying Bitcoin should easily be worth $700,000, well, that's nothing to scoff at. What BlackRock is saying here is essentially saying those quiet parts out loud, and you should really listen in to what they have to say. Now, these guys are going to keep pumping the bags of Bitcoin as well as not selling. You, on the other hand, might be forced to sell if you want to increase your lifestyle, do something else. On the flip side of things, I don't necessarily think you need to. If you go to saltlending.com/green candle, you can do exactly just that. You could borrow against your Bitcoin, and you don't need to go and sell it, right? So you could get rates as low as 8.95%, a duration of 12 months, borrow up to 70% of that LTV, all with no prepayment fees and no rehypothecation. So there's no funny business going on. And the best part of all of this is that they're offering an exclusive offer for the Green Candle listeners. So if you go to saltlending.com/green candle and do it today, you could unlock this special offer because we've got Bitcoin sitting around 111,000 right now, as we have people like Larry Fink telling us it should be 700,000. And there is $7.4 trillion sidelined in money market funds. So there's a ton of dry powder here being on the sidelines waiting to go into Bitcoin and other assets. And the Genius Act of buying Bitcoin without taxpayers' money, I don't know if they're going to be able to do that, to be honest. And, the U.S. Department of Strategy, Tether will be the Federal Reserve version 2. That could potentially be it. I mean, Russia is lining it up. And, to be honest, Russia and the likes of those political strategists over there, they're a little bit more honest than I would say the United States government is. And, let's listen into a little bit more on what they had to say about this U.S. government potentially using Bitcoin as a hoax. Now, usually when I get a little bit later in these, I lose sound. So make sure you guys let me know if you can still hear.
В общем-то, это два альтернативных валютному сегменту мировых рынка. Действия Вашингтона в этом направлении отчетливо демонстрируют одну из главных американских задач. Они очень хотят решить проблему снижения доверия к доллару.
So they have to address the problem that the dollar is declining. And I mean, if you look at the dollar index, right, the Dixie, those of you guys who know my other channel, Macro Insights, I love to show this. But I mean, we're sitting at 97.8 for the Dixie. Now, for those of you who don't know, aren't super familiar with that, the Dixie, you want to have it around 100 or more just to kind of keep the dollar dominance around. And the dollar right now has had its worst start since 1973. So over 50 years. And it's had a terrible, terrible start with all of this. So the dollar having one of its worst starts in 50 years, you need an escape hatch. And so that escape hatch is essentially Bitcoin at this point in time. And we're still waiting to see these guys really claw their way out of it. And something is going to have to give. Now, it's interesting to see Cantor Fitzgerald, now formerly of Howard Lubnick, who's going to be in charge of the U.S. Sovereign Wealth Fund when that actually comes out. But Cantor Fitzgerald came out and started a new Bitcoin and gold fund. So you could get 45% of the Bitcoin upside with gold protecting the principal. Wall Street blending Bitcoin with gold. Very, very interesting here. Now, it's also interesting how we've seen this whole thing develop with Saylor and the United States government, because Saylor is proposing this $200 trillion bill, but Senator Cynthia Lummis has proposed the Bitcoin Act, and she did it a while ago. And her Bitcoin Act essentially was saying, hey, we're going to buy 200,000 worth of Bitcoin, 200,000 Bitcoin, excuse me, not worth. So 200,000 Bitcoin, which is priced at 111,000 right now per coin. So 200,000 of those every year for 5 years. And then we're going to hold on to that for 20 years. That was her plan. Saylor's like, no, 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 that's not enough. We need to get up to 5 million coins. And, we're going to start to see this number trickle up more. That $7.4 trillion in money market funds. That's going to go up significantly, especially in about 8 days from now, when we see the Fed cut interest rates. Right now, we have a 91.8, so basically a 92% that we're going to cut by at least 25 basis points, and an 8.2% chance that we're going to cut by 50. So this is basically to line out and show that there's a 100% chance we're going to cut interest rates. It's just a matter of how much. Now, if you look at the likes of JP Morgan and some of these other big players, they're all saying we should cut 50 basis points. And they're assuming we're going to cut 50 basis points. Even BlackRock's CIO said the Federal Reserve should cut by 50 basis points. All because these guys know that this is going to pump their bags, right? So JP Morgan and all of these big guys, they're bracing for impact on the potential of the consumer being very weak and hurting here, especially with some of the, let's call it, tough economic data that we're seeing. I mean, we've seen major revisions to the U.S. job market. In fact, there's been nearly 1 million jobs revised down here within the past year. And these rate cuts are basically coming. These job revisions that they've lined out is 230,000 larger than expected. It's also 93,000 larger than the preliminary revision in 2024. So combined, these revisions have now exceeded 1.7 million in jobs that they initially thought that they had, but actually do not have. So these things just line out for a very weak consumer. And so because the consumer is so weak and there's a lot of, let's call it, issues underneath the hood, well, that just leaves the Fed open for reasonings to cut interest rates. That's going to happen really soon. And I don't think that's slowing down. All of these guys are going to be like, hey, you know what? Maybe we should be cutting interest rates. Why? Well, because when we look at the Fed and how they are lining up against, everybody else globally, well, hey, we're going to see these interest rates really affect how Bitcoin is going to play out. Now, I think you guys should all look into the best solution to hold and store your Bitcoin. There has been some issues, and some people say that there's been some hacks here recently, but I think that you guys know that Trezor is the #1 place to hold your Bitcoin, and this is the importance of holding it on a hardware wallet. There's been a lot of people saying that there's been changes, some drifts, some things like that. So you have to be cautious when you're entering into your hardware wallet. Make sure you guys are double checking that and storing your seed phrase in a great place. But somebody even stole and was lending out my promo code. So it is from down here, but you got to use the promo code GreenCandle5, the number 5. So use promo code GreenCandle5. You could get anything off. I've got mine, Trezor Safe 5 right here. You got to use promo code GreenCandle5 to get that 5%. So we had to add the number on the end because some website was giving out my promo code and people weren't watching the show. So you go to there, then you go back up your Bitcoin seed phrase using a crypto steel case. It's the foolproof solution. You go to cryptosteel.com/green candle. You get your case. Look at this right here. It can withstand up to 1 ton. You do that. You can't get hacked because it's metal. It's not connected to the internet. You do all that. You buy those today. That's the foolproof way to make sure that your Bitcoin is safe. Now, why am I saying you got to make sure that your Bitcoin is safe? Well, there's been one of the bigger hacks that we've ever seen here. A large-scale supply chain attack is in process. It's affected nearly 1 billion of people. The malicious payload was working swapping crypto addresses to steal funds. Now, you got to make sure, like I said, if you're using the hardware wallet and you're not moving your Bitcoin, you should be perfectly fine. But that promo code, like All Nighter Hider said, it's the name Green Candle then 5. I can't write it out because people have been stealing it. But either way, like I said, if you use a hardware wallet, you got to pay attention. Double, triple check all of your wallets that you're moving things like that back and forth. Make sure that you aren't seeing or you're not being so, let's call it, just willy-nilly flinging your seed phrase everywhere. Hide it in crypto steel, or store it in a crypto steel. I'm sorry, not hide. But I guess that's the same, but different here. Because this could be generational wealth when we're sitting at 111,000. Make sure you guys are smoking that like and hitting that subscribe button for your boy over here. Because we got strategy even buying more Bitcoin today. So we're seeing these Bitcoin treasury companies pop up like crazy. I mean, if you look at it, these Bitcoin treasury companies are over a Satoshi right now. They're at 100,000. They're at 100 and no, they're at, 1,005,881 Bitcoin. Man, these numbers threw me off. Maybe it's the glasses. I don't know. But green candle, then the number 5 for that Trezor promo code. Either way, you guys should not be selling your Bitcoins. You can borrow against it. My good friends over at Salt or some other one. I mean, as long as you guys make sure that they aren't rehypothecating, don't sell your corns. Because Russia, the United States, all these guys, they're looking at this, right? They're saying, hey, the U.S. is losing their power of the dollar, and they're going to try to keep on keeping on with it. Make sure you guys are hitting that subscribe button for me and telling a friend to tell a friend. I'm going to be detailing all of these things to you. So I'll catch you guys all on the flip side.